Hi, welcome back to week 7. We are now in the chapter of integumentary, or I should say week 7 of integumentary. There is no actual integumentary chapter in your Patho book. So a lot of what we're going through is just some review of the basic um, pathophysiology and biology of the integumentary system, as well as your basic health assessment and clinical pearls of what to know and review when it comes to the integumentary system. So here we go, guys. So the first thing I just wanted to review is the integumentary system as a whole. Keep in mind the physical barriers of the skin and the mucosa. And these regions physically interact with substances and microorganisms in the environment. Keep in mind the skin is the body's largest organ, which is made up of water, protein, fats, and minerals. And the 3 layers of the tissue that make up the skin are the epidermis, the dermis, and the middle layer. The hypodermis is the bottom or the fatty layer. The other big thing I wanted to point out is the skin is the major organ of the integumentary system. But the integumentary system doesn't just include the skin, it also includes the nails and the hair. Keep in mind the skin is the body's largest organ and is remarkable at that. I wanted you to just realize that the average square inch of skin has 20 blood vessels, 650 sweat glands, and more than 1,000 nerve endings. It also has about 60,000 pigment-producing cells, and all of these structures are packed into a stack of cells that is about only 2 millimeters thick, or about as thick as the cover of a book. Keep in mind the skin is the heaviest organ of the body, covering a total area of ranging up to 1.5 to 2 square meters, and it makes up 15% of the total body weight of a human being. In terms of thickness, the skin is in some places 1 to 2 millimeters thick, whereas in other places it can range from 0 to 5 millimeters to 6 millimeters, depending on the location. Okay. So organs of the integumentary system. So again, it's the largest organ in the body, and it also is composed of the skin and its accessory structures, including the nails, hair, sebaceous or oil glands, and the sweat glands. Your skin, along with your hair, nails, oil glands, and sweat glands, is part of the integumentary system, which means a body's outer covering. So the layers of the skin. So we have the epidermis, the dermis, and the subcutaneous. The epidermis contains cells that produce pigment and protect the immune system. We have the dermis, which contains nerve endings, oil, and sweat glands and hair follicles. And then we have subcutaneous tissue, which make up fat, connective tissue, and larger blood vessels. So what does the epidermis, or the top layer of the skin, do? Your epidermis is the top layer of the skin that you can see and touch. Keratin, a protein inside the skin cells, makes up the skin cells and, along with other proteins, sticks together to form this layer, the epidermis, which acts as a protective barrier. Keep in mind the epidermis keeps bacteria and germs from entering your body and bloodstream and causing infection. It protects against rain, sun, and other elements. It makes new skin. The epidermis continually makes new skin cells. These new skin cells replace approximately 40,000 old skin cells that your body sheds every single day. You have new skin every 30 days. The epidermis also protects your body. With the Langerhans cells within the epidermis, which are part of the body's immune system, they help fight off germs and infections. The epidermis also provides color because it contains melanin. Melanin is the pigment that gives skin its color, and the amount of melanin you have determines the color of your skin, hair, and nails. People who make more melanin have darker skin and may tan more quickly. So what does the dermis, or the middle layer of the skin, do? So the dermis makes up 90% of the skin's thickness. This middle layer of skin has collagen and elasticin. Collagen is a protein that makes skin cells strong and resilient. And elastin is another protein found in the dermis, which keeps skin flexible. It also helps stretch skin regain its strength. So collagen makes skin cells strong and resilient, while elastin helps skin stay flexible. Your skin also grows hair. The roots of hair follicles actually attach to the dermis. It also makes oil. Your dermis has oil glands in it, which help keeps the skin soft and smooth. Oil also prevents your skin from absorbing too much water when you swim or get caught in a rainstorm. Your dermis also produces sweat glands. Sweat glands in the dermis release sweat through skin pores, and sweat helps regulate your body's skin temperature. Your dermis also supplies blood. Okay, blood vessels in the dermis provide nutrients to the epidermis, keeping the skin layers healthy. And last but not least, we have the last layer, the bottom layer of skin, the hypodermis, which is the fatty layer, also called, your subcutaneous tissue. The fat in the hypodermis protects muscles and bones from injuries when you fall or are in an accident. It also has a connective tissue. The connective tissue connects layers of skin to muscles and bones. Your dermis also helps the nerves and blood vessels. Nerves and blood vessels in the dermis get larger in the hypodermis, and these nerves and blood vessels branch out to connect the hypodermis to the rest of the body. And most importantly, the fat in the hypodermis regulates your body temperature, which keeps you from getting too hot or too cold. Okay, so we have the layers of the skin. And what are the layers of the skin? We discussed this earlier. We have the epidermis, dermis, and the hypodermis. All right, so the outer layer of skin is the epidermis, the inner layer is the dermis, and then we have the innermost layer, which is the hypodermis. The epidermis is the outer layer of the skin consisting of epithelial cells and little else. For example, there are no nerve endings or blood vessels in the epidermis or the most outer layer of the skin. Let me repeat that. There are no nerve endings or blood vessels in the epidermis, which is the most outer layer of the skin. The innermost cells of the epidermis are continuously dividing through mitosis to form new cells. The newly formed cells move up through the epidermis towards the skin surface while producing a tough fibrous protein called keratin. The cells become filled with keratin and die by the time they reach the surface where they form a protective waterproof layer called the stratum corneum. The dead cells are gradually shed from the surface of the skin and replaced by other cells. So we have these cell layers of the epidermis. So the epidermis consists mainly of epithelial cells. Okay, there are 5 different kinds of cells in the epidermis of the skin. Again, the outermost layer has 5 different kinds of cells. We have stem cells, keratinocytes, melanocytes, tactile cells. We also have keratinocytes, stratum basale, and tactile cells, which are found in the basal layer and are the receptors for touch. Whereas dendritic cells are the immune cells that protect the layers of the skin from pathogens. Then in the dermis, or in the lower layer of the skin located directly beneath the epidermis, we have the tough connective tissue attached to the epidermis by collagen fibers. The dermis contains the blood vessels and nerve endings. Because of the nerve endings, skin can feel, touch, pressure, heat, cold, and pain. The dermis also contains hair follicles and 2 types of glands. Hair follicles are the structures where hairs originate. So again, your hair follicles are located in your dermis, and this is where your hairs originate. Hair grows out of the follicles, passes through the epidermis, and exits at the surface of the skin. Your sebaceous glands produce an oily substance called sebum. Sebum is secreted into hair follicles and makes its way to the skin surface. It waterproofs the hair and skin and helps them from drying out. Sebum also has antibacterial properties, so it inhibits the growth of microorganisms on the skin. Sweat glands produce the salty fluid called sweat, which contain excess water, salts, and other waste products. The glands, or the sweat glands, have ducts that pass through the epidermis and open to the surface through pores in the skin. So next, functions of the skin. So a lot of this should be a review for you guys, but I just wanted to point out the most important things for you to make sure you're aware of in terms of just the pathophysiology of it all, as well as things you might need to make sure you review for your boards. So here in slide 6, we have functions of the skin. So keep in mind the skin has multiple roles in the body, and most of these roles are related to homeostasis. The skin's main functions are preventing water loss from the body, as well as serving as a barrier to the entry of microorganisms. In addition, your melanin in the skin blocks UV light and protects deeper layers from its damaging effects. The skin also helps regulate your body temperature. And when the body is too warm, obviously sweat is released by the sweat glands and spreads over the skin surface. As the sweat evaporates, it cools the body. Blood vessels in the skin also dilate or widen when the body is too warm. This allows more blood to flow through the skin, bringing body heat to the surface where it radiates into the environment. When the body is too cool, on the other hand, sweat glands stop producing sweat and blood vessels in the skin constrict or narrow, thus conserving the body heat. So we know the skin protects the body from water loss and from injury, from bumps, chemicals, sunlight, or microorganisms, as well as helping keep control of body temperature. But another thing it does is the synthesis of vitamin D, as well as it is a sensory pathway that allows humans to experience the sensation of touch and temperature, as seen here in this diagram of the sense organs in the skin. So any changes in the surrounding environment are sensed by the hair follicles, which transmit the signal to the neurons in the underlying skin. The skin contains different kinds of receptors for different kinds of responses. The Meissner corpuscle, also called the tactile corpuscle, is responsible for response towards the stimulus of light touch. One of the essential functions of the skin is thermoregulation. So changes in temperature in the environment are sensed by sensors present in the skin. With the aid of the sympathetic nervous system, the integumentary system regulates body temperature in response to the changes in the surrounding environment. The main accessories in thermoregulation are the sweat glands, which control the amount of water loss or retention through the surface of the skin depending on the environmental temperature. And this is how the body is maintained at a stable temperature of about 37 degrees Celsius under normal conditions. Okay, so then we have our sweat glands. So the amount of sweat a human body produces ranges from about 500 to 1.5 liters, depending on the external environment. In the resting state, the human body produces around 500 milliliters of sweat a day. It is known as insensible perspiration. Under high temperatures or high level of activity, the sweat glands stimulated by the sympathetic nervous system produce an increased amount of sweat that can range from 0.7 liters to 1.5 liters per hour. The body temperature is brought back to normal due to the evaporation of sweat from the surface of the skin. Sweat glands, also known as sudoriferous glands, are of two types, which are apocrine and eccrine glands, as you can see here. Apocrine sweat glands are found in the anal region, the areola, and the groin. The ducts of apocrine sweat glands open into hair follicles and sweat produced by these glands and have a high content of fatty acids. Merocrine sweat glands are found all over the rest of the body, mainly in the palms of the hands, soles of the feet, and the forehead. The ducts of these glands open into a skin pore on the surface of the skin. So over here, as you can see, as it says here, the eccrine glands, again, as a review, are most numerous on the palms of the hands and the soles of the feet, as opposed to the apocrine glands, which are mostly found in the armpits and the groins, and are mostly a result of emotional stress or anxiety. Okay, conditions and disorders that affect the skin. So as the body's external protection system, your skin is at risk for various problems, and these include allergies like contact dermatitis and poison ivy rashes, blisters, bug bites such as spider bites, tick bites, and mosquitoes, skin cancer including melanoma or basal cell carcinoma, skin infections like cellulitis, skin disorders such as acne, eczema, psoriasis, and vitiligo, skin lesions such as moles, freckles, and skin tags, and wounds such as burns, scars, and pressure ulcers. Okay, melanin. So the big thing I want you to really understand about melanin is that the epidermis contains melanocytes, which are cells that produce melanin. Melanin is the brownish pigment that gives skin much of its color. Everyone has about the same number of melanocytes, but the melanocytes of people with darker skin produce more melanin. So the amount of melanin produced is determined by heredity and exposure to UV light, which increases melanin output. Exposure to UV light also stimulates the skin to produce vitamin D. Because melanin blocks UV light from penetrating the skin, people with darker skin may be at greater risk of vitamin D deficiency. Okay, so getting into vitamin D, let's just talk about vitamin D synthesis, which is obviously initiated by the skin. So keep in mind, the epidermal layer of human skin synthesizes vitamin D when exposed to UV radiation. In the presence of sunlight, a form of vitamin D3 called cholecalciferol is synthesized from a derivative of the steroid cholesterol in the skin. The liver converts cholecalciferol to calcilyl, which is then converted to calcitriol, the active chemical form of the vitamin in the kidneys. Vitamin D is essential for normal absorption of calcium and phosphorus, which are required for healthy bones. The absence of sun exposure can lead to a lack of vitamin D in the body, leading to a condition called rickets, a painful condition in children where the bones are misshapen due to a lack of calcium called bow-leggedness. Elderly individuals who suffer from vitamin D deficiency can develop a condition called osteomalacia, a softening of the bones. In present-day society, vitamin D is added to as a supplement in many foods, including milk and orange juice, compensating for the need for sun exposure. In addition to its essential role in bone health, vitamin D is essential for general immunity against bacterial, viral, and fungal infections. Recent studies are also finding a link between insufficient vitamin D and cancer. So keep that in mind. Okay, the skin's role in immune defense. So the skin is a complex organ, which is very crucial for maintaining important functions for the host physiology, such as preventing fluid loss, stabilizing body temperature, and relaying sensory inputs. In addition, the skin also harbors a highly specialized immunological niche, crucial for the maintenance of tissue homeostasis, defense, and repair. In this review, we have to really make sure you guys understand the structure of the skin and its intrinsic defensive mechanisms, with a focus on the skin resident immune cells and their contribution to tissue repair. One of the essential functions of the skin is thermal regulation. Changes in temperature in the environment are sensed by sensors present in the skin. With the aid of the sympathetic nervous system, the integumentary system regulates body temperature in response to the changes in the surrounding environment. The main responses in your skin in thermal regulation are the sweat glands, which control the amount of water loss or retention through the surface of the skin, depending on the environmental temperature. This is how the body is maintained at a stable temperature of about 37 degrees Celsius under normal conditions. Okay. So whenever we're talking about skin, I always feel like it's really important to just come back to the basics of uh, making sure we're very conscious of the ABCDs of skin cancer, which is a basic assessment and just a standardized reminder of what to look for when it comes to abnormal skin uh, findings, and just making sure you're looking at these 4 different factors that are very indicative of skin cancer. So we have asymmetry, which is the ABCDs of skin cancer. So for A, we have asymmetry. B, we have border irregularity. C, we have color. And D, we have diameter. So keep in mind, skin cancer is a disease in which skin cells grow out of growth. It is caused mainly by excessive exposure to UV light. People with lighter skin are at greater risk of developing skin cancer because they have less melanin to block harmful UV radiation. The best way to prevent skin cancer is to avoid UV exposure by using sunscreen and wearing protective clothing. Okay, again, so how do we protect our skin? We can't just talk about all these skin conditions and all these risk factors for skin issues without talking about how we are to protect the skin, whether it's for ourselves or to educate our patients. So, of course, we're going to talk about applying sunscreen anytime we're out in the sun for more than half an hour. We don't want to tan indoors or outdoors. We want to find healthy ways to manage stress. Because keep in mind, stress can make certain skin conditions worse, especially like any kind of acne or rosacea. We want to perform regular skin checks and mold checks to look for any changes that might be indicative of skin cancer. We want to quit smoking and using tobacco products because nicotine and other chemicals in cigarettes and electronic cigarettes definitely age skin faster. We want to use gentle cleansers to wash our face in the morning and night. We want to shower regularly and apply moisturizing lotion to prevent dry skin. And we want to make sure we're using sunscreen and limiting exposure to the sun during peak sun hours, like between 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And how do we do that? We seek shade, avoid direct sunlight. We want to make sure we're using broad spectrum sunscreen that filters both UVA and UVB rays, and it has an SPF of 30 or higher, especially even in the winter or on cloudy days. We want to apply liberally and reapply every 2 hours. In addition to wearing sunscreen, we want to make sure we're in sunglasses with 100% UV protection, as well as a wide-brimmed hat. The more protection, the better. All right, guys, so that's it. Those are the main things I just wanted to point out in terms of the integumentary system. Please look at our Canvas for any additional readings that you had to make sure you were on top of. And if you had any questions, please reach out. Thanks, guys. Hope you have a great week.